First round nearly in the books. We're going live today on this episode of Locked On 49ers to break down everything that happened in round one, how it might change things in round two for the 49ers and the entire NFL. Did the 49ers division rivals get better in the first round without the 49ers participating? And what about that offensive tackle position? Is it really that important? Previewing day two, where the San Francisco 49ers will be involved on this episode of Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock, at Eric Crocker on Twitter. Thanks everybody for making Eric underscore Crocker. Did I say the underscore? Eric underscore Crocker on Twitter. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Perfect timing with the NFL draft. Have you ever thought you could draft better than an NFL GM? I have thought that in the past about certain 49ers GMs. If you think you can do the same and you've ever dreamed of becoming a GM, manage your own football franchise, this game is definitely for you. Download Ultimate Football GM. Just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo code Locked On in the game. Ultimate Football GM. I love the draft, Croc. I love the draft so much, and it always shocks me, and it always shocks everybody. And every mock draft that you think this is unrealistic and crazy, the real NFL draft is always more crazy, and it blows my mind, and I love it so much. And I don't even know where to begin except for at the top with the fireworks, and DeMeco Ryans going a little crazy. DeMeco Ryans at the top of the draft going Will Anderson, or actually, to take it back, going CJ Stroud second, Will Anderson, number 3, trading a bunch to get up from 12 to 3, going back-to-back to Texans at 2 and 3 to really kick off a zany first round and a really fun first round of the draft. So shout out to DeMeco trying to build that thing in the 49ers vision. But also, unlike the 49ers in his first draft, didn't want to pass over quarterbacks either. So he kind of did both. He got his Bosa and he got his future quarterback in CJ Stroud.
Oh, yeah. Once I saw them trade up, and one of the parents of the kids I was training, they were at my house dropping off some a check, and I'm watching it, and I'm trying to pay attention to them and focus on them while also focused on the draft. And I see Houston move up, and I said to them, "No way, this is for Will Anderson." And he drafted Will Anderson. That was good. And now again, we don't know what these guys are going to be. Anybody can be a bust, but on draft day, if I'm a Houston Texans fan, I'm extremely excited about one, getting DeMeco Ryans from the 49ers and the type of leader and coach that he is. And then 2, potentially having your quarterback of the future. And then having just a stalwart edge rusher that's really going to help your defense on top of, having the guys that they got last year with Jalen Petrie and Derek Stingley and some of those guys. So a lot to be excited about if you're a Houston Texans fan.
Absolutely. It's funny because the Texans overpaid to go get an edge player, I think, to go from 12 to 3. But if they would have just drafted, and there had to be something to the strategy of we're going to draft a quarterback first, then trade up for the defensive player. Because if they just drafted Anderson at 2 and then gave all that up to draft the quarterback, the trade doesn't look as bad because that's the right amount you trade to go from 12 to 3 for a quarterback. They got the same 2 players, but because they traded up for the player at 3 that was the defensive player, it looks like they gave up too much in the trade, even though it's the same amount of draft capital for 2 players. But if they did it opposite,
Right,
it would have seemed better because they traded up to 3 instead of traded up to 2.
Well, maybe they had already decided they were taking the quarterback, and they didn't know if they could actually make the trade work at 3.
Yeah, so they didn't want to take Anderson at 2 and miss out on the quarterback because they couldn't make the trade happen. So they
Right.
had to take the quarterback first, and then they're like, well, we're going to do the same trade, so it's the same difference. But it looks worse just because what they gave up to get Anderson at 2. But really what they were doing is combining all of their assets that were given up in those 2 picks to get those 2 players. And, they got better. They got a lot better.
What'd they give up?
Oh, shoot. I don't have it in front of me right now.
I will say this. I see CSL in the casino in the chat, and he says, "Is Will Anderson, Houston pick at number 3, really that good to trade all of that I don't know exactly what they traded. Haven't paid attention to the top of the draft since the Niners don't have a first or a second. I'll say this: if he were being drafted last year, if he was draft eligible, he would have undoubtedly been the #1 overall pick. Like that's how
Yes. Oh,
everyone
no
felt.
doubt.
This year was not as strong, but it almost felt like the Clowney thing, where it's like I'm the #1 overall pick, kind of regardless. And obviously, he ended up going #3 because of the quarterbacks. But he is a special talent at edge. And again, there was a slight drop off in his play this year as opposed to last year. Last year, as a true sophomore, he was the best player in college football, like the best. So that's the type of caliber of player that they're getting. He's freakishly athletic. He's one of those guys like you can run at or whatever, but he is a terrific prospect.
By the way, somebody dropped the exact trade. I saw it earlier, and I don't want to get it wrong. So somebody dropped, so I don't have to look it up. Somebody dropped the exact trade parameters that the Texans used to go from 12 to 3 in the chat for us. Joe says it's smart because trading up for Anderson is cheaper than Stroud, but I don't think it was. I think they gave up the same amount as it would have cost either way. I don't think it was a lot cheaper. And I thought that at first. I was like, oh, maybe that's genius because you draft the quarterback, and then when you're talking trade, you don't have the quarterback bump on the trade value. It was still quite a bit to go up. And maybe it wasn't Niners, because Niners, remember, went from 12 to 3. I don't think they went 2 years into the future with first round picks, but they gave up 33 this year, which is okay. Here we go. We got it. So it's pick 12, 33 this year.
And real quick, pick 12 is a swap. So you got to, because with the 49ers, people got that confused. Like, you traded 3 picks for Trey Lance. It's a swap.
Can't argue about the swap.
Yeah,
I can't argue about the swap again.
Exit out the 12. So they gave up the 33.
It's the same trade. It's the same trade, Croc. So pick 33 this year is worth the same as a future first round pick, with devaluing a pick from second round to first round. And plus, that's pick 33. That's really high. That's very close to being a first round pick anyway this year. So the Niners traded pick 12 to go up to pick 3, and they traded away a third, and then they traded away 2 first round picks. That's essentially the same deal that the Texans gave up here to get up to number 3.
Because of the one in the future. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So instead of the future 1, it was a 2 this year at 33, which is really high, a 1 next year, and a 3. So very similar value there.
You typically don't see someone trade all that up, for an edge. But I think for them, it's just if you're them and Nick Caserio, he's the GM, you're just looking at it as a package deal. We trade these picks, we get our quarterback and the edge rusher. And that's how I would look at it, and I'd be comfortable with that. Now, now that we know they went quarterback, do they regret winning that last game and moving from first to second?
No doubt.
Would they have drafted
for sure
Young over Stroud?
I bet they would have. I really do think they would have. And I think they do regret that. And nobody will ever admit it. But a nice little parting shot by Lovie Smith on the way out. I think it was a Hail Mary, right? Didn't he throw a Hail Mary or something like that to win that game for the Texans? And but overall, you have to so if you look at it as they went up to get their quarterback, CJ Stroud, now he better be good. I think I still would have played it if I was the Texans. And when I was watching the draft and CJ Stroud was announced as the second pick, I kind of booed it. I was like, oh, this is boring. This draft is going to be chalky and boring, right? Is that the way it's going to go? And then all of a sudden, boom, Texans back on the clock at 3. It's like, okay, good. We're going to have fun, because I wanted to see Anderson at 2 just to have a more fun first round. And it turns out the Texans did us a favor and still went up to number 3 and made the first round really fun. And next, Croc, we got to look at what the Cardinals and what the Seattle Seahawks did. The Seattle Seahawks drafted 2 players. How much better did they get? How much scarier are the Seattle Seahawks right now? And the Arizona Cardinals obviously have a lot more extra picks to spend later and to draft players with later after moving back from pick 3 to allow the Texans up. And then they moved again with the Detroit Lions out of the 12 spots. So more on the division specifically, how much better did 49ers rivals get in the first round of the draft, and what changes for the 49ers? What about this idea that maybe offensive tackles even overrated, Croc, and the 49ers don't really need to go crazy and prioritize offensive tackle in this draft or maybe ever. Next.
And real quick, also,
Yeah.
talk about the running backs being drafted as high as they were. I definitely have a bone to pick with the NFL on that. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh, don't even. I mean, come on. Everybody knows where I'm about to go with the running backs getting drafted at 8 and 12 in the NFL draft in this one. Lots of takes, lots of fun things. And the first round's not done, so we'll finish it up. And who knows, maybe the 49ers will jump on the clock while we're live here with some massive trade that we did not see coming. Coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. You've heard us talk about this mobile game app for a while, and we had a lot of fun playing this game and competing against our Locked On NFL hosts. And if you think you'd make a good GM and you're getting pumped for draft season, you want to build your own squad, well, download Ultimate Football GM. Go to the app stores and download it right now and have a whole lot of fun. You can go to ultimate-gm.com as well to find the game, and you get control of every managerial aspect of your team. Strategically build your team to glory, trying to make that historic dynasty. Build your team for 25 seasons on Ultimate Football GM. You're responsible for the destiny of your coaching staff, hiring and firing the right coaches and coordinators. Run the system you want on offense and defense. Manage all the financial aspects of your team, negotiating player salaries and terms. Navigate through free agency, of course, the draft, injuries, player personnel issues, and all the ups and downs of a season. Some things might even surprise you that pop up during a season of Ultimate Football GM. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM, completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want to and when you want to. And Locked On 49ers listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using promo code Locked On inside the game. So make sure you check it out today. Go to ultimate-gm.com. Look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Seattle Seahawks. My favorite part of the draft from a 49ers perspective here, just looking at Niners, who they're playing, how this thing is shaping up in the NFC. My favorite part of the first round was that at pick number 4, after the Texans did what the Texans did, Anthony Richardson went to the Indianapolis Colts at 4. Now, he's a project, but he is so physically talented. I'm just glad he didn't go the next pick to the Seattle Seahawks, that he wasn't there for the Seahawks. Now, the Seahawks got a good player, but what Anthony Richardson could become, the fact that the 49ers don't have to worry about if potentially Anthony Richardson bumped his head on the ceiling of his physical ability, that they don't have to deal with that could potentially be a thorn in their side for the next decade. I think that's a win for the 49ers, even though cornerback Devin Witherspoon that the Seahawks drafted at pick 5 is a pretty darn good player, and he's a baller.
He is a baller, but outside cornerbacks versus 49ers is the last thing I worry about. Like, they don't just target those guys like that. They work over the middle, the intermediate, the slants, the inside breaking routes. They put linebackers in conflict. They'll attack a safety. They do all those things, but they're not the team that's going to say, hey, Deebo Samuel, just run a 8-yard stop and we're just going to throw it to you against this corner because we just don't think he's good. Or, however they want to do it. Like, that's not their game, or that hasn't been how Kyle Shanahan calls his games. And maybe it's because of who's that quarterback. Maybe it's, Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't throw well out there, or maybe even, Brock Purdy, that's not where he really attacks the field. That's not his strength. That could be the case, but we don't see it. And I've always wondered that. Like, you go into some of these games and they have poor cornerbacks, and it's like, dude, attack him. Nah, stick to my game plan, which fine. It has worked very well for them. But you see Witherspoon, I think he is a terrific player. Love his skill set. A little slight, but plays big. So, but I don't think the 49ers will have to really worry about him.
Somebody asked me, can Witherspoon tackle? And I was like, yeah, he's a physical guy despite his size, and he can tackle. But tackling and tackling Deebo Samuel is two different scenarios.
Yeah. And everybody has trouble. I mean, the most physical corners, we saw Jalen Ramsey just kind of like bounce right off of him, and he might be the most physical corner in the NFL.
Yeah, Jalen Ramsey's got 20 pounds on 25, 30 pounds.
30 pounds. 30 pounds on Witherspoon.
On Witherspoon, yeah. So Eagles made their second selection just now. We're on pick 30 of the first round, and the Eagles go Nolan Smith. And Tim says Eagles replace Javon Hargrave with Jalen Carter. That D-line is the scariest in the league. Yeah, and guess what? They just added speed off the edge with Nolan Smith too at 30. So, and look, I kept telling people, everyone was trying to say, oh man, that team would be scary if they added Bijan Robinson. Eagles aren't going to add a running back. That's not the way that team is built. That's not the way their mentality is. They were going in the trenches. It was going to be offense, defensive line all day long. The fact that they got Carter and they had to trade up one spot for him, I don't know if they needed to, but they did. And then Nolan Smith now at the end of round one, that's a lot of talent on that D line, keeping a strength to strength, and I like it for the Eagles.
That's
the Niners competition. I mean, we talked about Seahawks.
Yeah, we
need to focus on the Eagles. That's the 49ers. That's what's most in the way for the 49ers in a Super Bowl right now. Any team in the NFL, it's the Philadelphia Eagles.
What do you think makes them like kind of that? All right, 49ers kind of looking up at them, dang near. That's how it feels. And what would you say, like, kind of the deciding factors between the two teams? Because they are kind of built similarly, but it feels like they, as many good players as the 49ers have, it feels like the Eagles might have a couple more than the 49ers.
I would say, well, look, it's going to get addressed maybe tomorrow. Tight end too. Who's going to block that? Who's going to block that guy off the edge when Kyle Shanahan calls a play action and has a tight end? No, but really, I mean, they're just built really well, and now they've got their quarterback, right? And so they've got weapons on offense. They can run the ball because they're so good on the offensive line, and that's the key. If you want to run the ball, put together an offensive line. You don't go running back with a bad line and run the ball. You build an offensive line, and then you're going to be good at running the ball, and you're going to be good at protecting your quarterback. And they've got weapons in the passing game, and they've got a studly best defensive line in the NFL just added to it with 2 first-round picks, even though they lost Javon Hargrave. And and they're pretty good in the back seven as well. So they're a scary team because they're built well. They've got a stud quarterback, and they can come after you with their pass rush. They can run the ball and they can throw the ball. And they got playmakers with the balls in their hands. Like they're just built really well. And when you look at the NFC, the AFC is a juggernaut. There's so many good teams, so many good quarterbacks in the AFC. There's not many teams that worry you in the NFC. And we just ran into that team. The 49ers did in the NFC Championship game. And right now, we're going to see power rankings and I don't think the draft changes power rankings very much. If they did power rankings today, same as if they do it in August, the NFC is going to be Philadelphia Eagles 1 and the 49ers 2.
Whose weapons are you taking? All right, as far as pass catchers go, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, or A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert?
I think we had the same conversation before the NFC Championship game, and I'm definitely taking the 49ers. But when you factor in quarterback and offensive line, I'm taking the Eagles.
Best offensive line in football last year.
Yeah, and Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts still has steps to take as an NFL quarterback, and he's already taken a lot of steps and already made $250 million.
Yeah. What do you think about, because you just talked about Bijan Robinson and potentially them going running back, and I know what the 49ers have done with Christian McCaffrey, but I actually hate what the Lions and Falcons did. First of all, listen, a lot of the way I view a lot of this is from a value standpoint. And like, what can I get now? What can't I get as far as production goes, etc. Tyler Algier for the Atlanta Falcons ran for 1,000 yards and averaged 5 yards a pop. All right. And I'm not saying 1,000 yards is crazy. I'm not saying he's a better running back than Bijan Robinson. But running backs get banged up. I mean, it's like guaranteed. And then teams is like pulling teeth trying to get them to give these guys a second contract. Like, they don't want to do it, but then it's like, we drafted him really high. We've already invested a lot of money in him. He played well. We kind of have to give it to him. Boo! Guy's career just kind of tanks it. You take a guy number 8 overall after having a running back go 1,000 yards, and Jacksonville did this recently as well. I just think it's so odd. And then the Detroit Lions, you have a chance. Again, we talked about 49ers drafting in the 3rd round. What's hard for the 49ers to get? Offensive line, cornerback, edge rusher, like those premier positions, like those teams, they go in the top 15. It's hard to get those in the second and third round. And if you are the Detroit Lions, you have not one chance, but two chances to really kind of bolster up at all those positions. And you said, you know what? No, we're going to go running back with Gibbs. And listen, he's a terrific back. He is. But number 12 overall, I'm just not doing it. I'm just not doing it. So you pass on cornerback, and which, okay, I get it. They did sign guys. They got Emmanuel Mosley and some of these other guys. But you pass on like premier positions, and you draft a running back, and then you double down and say, we don't care about value. And draft this linebacker from Iowa with like 4 career sacks. I mean, it was in 4 years, or 3 career sacks in 4 years. It's just a lot of stuff. It just didn't make sense from a value standpoint. They might end up being really good, but it's still kind of weird the way that their whole philosophy of drafting.
Yeah, the terrible draft. Like Lions had the worst draft by far. You have 6 and 18, and you end up with a running back and an off-ball linebacker. It's terrible for value. And the best way I can put it is, even when you hit, you lose. So you think back to Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey, who was awesome with the 49ers, right? But what did the Panthers win with Christian McCaffrey? And they hit on him. They hit on a good player. Saquon Barkley. The Giants hit on a good player. What did they win? The coach and GM got fired that drafted him. The coach and GM that drafted McCaffrey got fired. You know what I mean? And so even when you hit, you don't win. And you can draft a good player, but the value does not help your franchise. I love running backs. The Lions, my favorite non-49er of all time is Barry Sanders. He made every Lions game watchable in the 90s. I loved Barry Sanders, but guess what? They didn't win. They have one playoff appearance in my lifetime. And they're losing games like 48-45 last year, and they drafted an off-ball linebacker and a running back, and Gibbs is awesome. Gibbs is dynamic. By the way, I got to mention this, because with the Jahmyr Gibbs pick, the reason JP Mason wasn't starting at Georgia Tech, Jahmyr Gibbs was the guy in front of him.
Right.
So
and he was young too then.
Yeah.
And about freshman, sophomore year. Yeah.
How many transfers does Alabama have, by the way? There's a bunch of dudes that transferred to Alabama.
Like. They just got the quarterback from Notre Dame. I mean, he sucked, but maybe he'll play at Alabama. Yeah. I don't know who their quarterback is right now. They have the big buff black guy that looks like a linebacker, but
so don't trash JP Mason for not starting at Georgia Tech. There was a guy that just went 12 overall that was playing in front of him part of that time. So anyway, and he's dynamic. And
he was talented from the jump. It was almost weird he went to Georgia Tech. It was like, as a freshman, I remember watching him, and they're like, man, this guy's the next Reggie Bush. Like, that's what they were saying as a freshman, as a true freshman.
He's faster than Reggie Bush, man. Reggie Bush was a pedestrian compared to Jahmyr Gibbs, in my opinion. And Croc's not going to let that comment at all. But the one thing I will say about both running backs that were drafted in the first round, unless I don't think the first round's even quite over yet. Let me know if a running back gets drafted, or let me know if the 49ers jump on the clock. They're both assets in the passing game, which is huge. So if you're going to draft a running back high, they better have value in the passing game, because that's the value in the NFL. I don't see it for the Lions. I think they had the worst first round of everybody with the assets that they had. I don't think they really made themselves a lot better, and the things they needed to get better at, I don't think they got better at. So we'll see what it ends up looking like for the Detroit Lions. As for the Seattle Seahawks, Jackson Smith-Njigba, hated seeing him slide to them at number 20. That was a really nice pick for them. I think they got 2 really good players. I don't know if it makes them scary necessarily, but the Seattle Seahawks got better.
I think what makes them scary is what they've done over the last 2 drafts, right? So it's not just Jackson Smith-Njigba and Devin Witherspoon. It's Cross. It's Abraham Lucas. It's Tariq Woolen. The running back Kenneth Walker, and then you add these guys to them, and then can all their young guys, and even like Boye Mafe, who we didn't even mention, he was drafted second round. Like, can he take that next step? And then can they all just play a little bit better? And if they all play a little bit better, which a lot of times just kind of that natural progression, getting used to the NFL, et cetera. If they just get a little bit better, what does that look like? And then, Geno Smith, and we'll see if he has another year like he did last year. Maybe it's a one-off. But if a 49ers quarterback did what Geno Smith did, throwing for 4,300 yards, 30 touchdowns, number 7 overall QBR, highest completion percentage in the NFL. If a 49er quarterback did that, like, what would we be saying about that quarterback? I know he struggled against the 49ers, and maybe he'll continue to, so we never have to care about whatever else is going on. But he played well all year. So if he just plays well and everybody else gets a little bit better, that's difficult for the 49ers.
So, and the Seahawks are adding good players at an awesome rate right now. So that's what you worry about. Not necessarily that one of them alone is going to be such a difference maker that it hurts the 49ers, but all of them together, that's what could hurt the 49ers. They're putting together a squad over there.
And that's what they did in their runs when they kind of dominated the 49ers for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it was, a little bit more because they had the boogeyman and Russell Wilson. I mean, we know he was just a terror for the 49ers, but they typically have a lot of good football players, which makes it extremely difficult for the 49ers to compete with.
Yeah.
Right now, the 49ers are built for it, but if those guys just all get a little better that they had that were rookies last year, that's a little tough.
And now they got an even better quarterback than Russell Wilson.
He's played better. I mean, that was some of the best quarterback play I've seen from Seattle.
Better than him currently. I'd take Geno all day over Russ after what I've seen the last couple of years.
Yeah, just not against the 49ers, right? Like, and that was the opposite where, even sometimes Russell Wilson would look a little pedestrian against some teams, and then 49ers, he's got Michael Jordan in his prime, right? And I think with Geno, it was like he was, Kobe Bryant in his prime against everybody until he faced the 49ers, and then he was like, I don't know, Nick Mullins or somebody.
All right, the first round is officially over. The San Francisco 49ers did not jump back into the first round. What changes for the 49ers, though, on day 2 next? Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by our very good friends at Built Bar. You're looking for that delicious treat, right? Of course you are. There's no better treat that you can find than Built Bar. It is a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. Best tasting protein bar, not only on the market currently, but ever. You got to try Built. Go to Built.com and find healthy that tastes amazing. And most Built bars are covered in 100% real chocolate, which really sets them off. And you can find some flavors. I do have one weird friend, and I'm sure everyone has that one friend that doesn't really like chocolate that much. There are some Built bars that aren't covered in chocolate, but most Built bars covered in 100% real dark chocolate, which really sets them off for me because you feel like you're getting a treat. You don't even realize how good for you these bars are because they taste so amazing. But you're getting 17 grams of protein in most Built bars, but only 130 calories in most Built bars, and only 4 grams of sugar in most Built bars, with flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream. And you can not only find all of the flavors and varieties of Built bars and Built puffs at Built.com, but you can find them on your local store shelves as well at Walmart and Sam's Club. Go into Walmart right now. In the pharmacy section, you can find 4 bar boxes of cookies and cream, double chocolate and coconut puff. And if you go to Sam's Club, you can find 13 bar boxes of hit flavors, brownie batter puff and churro puff, and then thank us later. And of course, find all the flavors and varieties and new flavors showing up all the time at Built.com.
Hey, Peacock, we're talking all this about the running back and Jahmyr Gibbs. And I'm looking right now at the Detroit Lions when they drafted him. Is that the Detroit Lions excited like that? Maybe it's not.
Oh, they lost their minds. No, yeah, they announced the Jahmyr Gibbs pick, and they were chest bumping. They were shouting. They were so excited that they got a guy a full round too high. This is amazing.
Speaking of a full round too high, we mentioned on the previous episode Dontavion Wicks.
Yes.
And I went and watched Wicks. And this was a guy that met with the 49ers, right? Yeah. And I had no idea who he was. You were talking about, hey, he met with the 49ers, and you mentioned he's kind of like Jawan Jennings.
Yeah, it was like I saw the 4.6. It was like, what is this, a Jawan Jennings type? He didn't run fast. And then so both of us after the pod put on some Dontavion Wicks tape. And dude's not Jawan Jennings at all. He's very different. And that 4.6 is very curious because he doesn't play 4.6 at all.
Well, not only did he not play 4.6, and this was a weird thing for me. You see a guy jumping 40 inches on his vert. His broad jump was crazy. And I'm like, why is the 40 not matched? Typically, a guy that's just explosive, he's explosive in all aspects of his training for the most part. And you don't see that like 40-inch vert, 4.62. You typically don't see that. Then you come to find out he pulled his like hip flexor while running his 40 and then end up doing the field drills. So it's like, aha, because when I watched him, I said, I think I texted you, he plays much faster than 4.62. I mean, he was getting upfield, he was quick, he was shifty, he was twitched up, he's dogging dudes at the catch point. I'm like, who is this guy? Why have I never heard of him? So I'm watching the film and I'm like, I really like it. And he's catching passes, and the numbers weren't great this year. And it seemed like he missed some games, but even in the quarterback situation, I watched it. And if they wanted to throw to him like they did the year before, where he was a 1,300 yard receiver, feels like they could have. So this is a guy who may slip because his production dropped off, and maybe they don't pay any attention to that and draft him high anyways, but his production dropped off for whatever reason. And then he didn't run a great 40-yard dash. True, like legit scouts will say, no, listen, plays much faster than the 4.62, had the injury to his core while running it, and the quarterback maybe was bad or whatever, and that's the drop-off in production. But when you watch the film, he's like, if Kendrick Bourne was fast, that's the best way to describe it.
I mean, look, I think
nasty and blocking too. Aggressive blocker. It was literally like if Kendrick Bourne was fast, because Kendrick Bourne's twitched up and stuff. He's twitched up. He's very sudden. He's just not fast at all. And this guy not only is fast, like he's an explosive athlete. Like, I thought he looked to me like he ran 4.47, 4.48.
Yeah, 4.4 guy. Yeah, he's super explosive. You see him get down the sideline and scoot a little bit. You know, he's not a burner. He's not a 4.3 guy, but he's fast and he can get in and out of his breaks. And to be honest with you, most of the best wide receivers in NFL history run somewhere between 4.45 and 4.55. You know, like, that's the sweet spot, and that's what he plays at, I think. And I'm sure the 49ers brought him in as they watched him on tape. I'm sure they brought him in because they wanted to do a medical check on him. Now that I look at his history, look at his body of work, watch him on tape a little bit, it's like, okay, why do you bring in Dontavian Wicks out of Virginia? You super interested in him? Why would he specifically be the guy you bring in? Well, he had an injury last year in college and had that crazy drop off in production. So you're wondering, you still played 8 games. You only caught 30 passes and 400 yards in 8 games, right? When you had 1,200 yards a year before. What's going on there? You probably want to get in his head. This guy, did he dog it? Well, why did his production drop so much? Was he not playing through pain? Like, let's see how this guy's wired, and then do the medical checks on him, because not only did he get hurt last year, he came up lame at the combine. And, you know, the 49ers have had a lot of trouble with injuries. So if he passes that test and they're like, we're cool, we're not going to red tag him for injury, Dontavian Wicks could go high. He might even be one of the 49ers' 3rd round picks. Like, the tape is good. He was available in the 7th round in the mock draft simulator I was looking at. I've seen him in the 5th round. I've seen him in the middle rounds. I'm all about Dontavian Wicks. I would love him for the 49ers if he's there, probably, if I had to guess, in that 5th round range.
And that's what I was going to say, in the 5th round range. And one thing that John Lynch said in his presser, and we kind of skipped over it because we talked a lot about the quarterbacks and kind of nitpick different things that he said, trying to, overanalyze it, as we're supposed to, podcasters, content creators. But one thing that he did say is talking about bringing guys in and wanting to meet with them, because you just never know. And he was like, hey, last year, never expected Drake Jackson to be there at 61 for us, and he was. Thank God we did our due diligence on him. We knew who he was, and we looked at it, even though we did not expect him to be there. And maybe Wicks, after they look into everything, and other teams they invite him on the 30, and they're like, I don't expect him to be there in the 5th. We don't have a 4th round pick, but if he is there in the 5th, this might be a guy that we should probably take him. I like him, I like him more than what I watched from Danny Gray. I mean, I wasn't high on Danny Gray like that.
Yeah.
As far as like the speed, and at the end of the day, are you a vertical threat? So that's why you have Danny Gray. He is a vertical threat because of his speed. Well, Wicks, although he's not a 4.3 guy, he still wins vertically, whether it's contested or sometimes getting to step on guys, and when he tracks the ball in extremely well, even when there's a body on him. So I tweeted some things out about him last night saying, like, this guy's kind of nice. And there were people that were like, man, kind of reminds me of like Devontae Adams. And I'm like, damn, that's kind of, now listen, Devontae Adams and his production at Fresno State was out of this world. He was amazing. As a matter of fact, that's probably one of the best kept secrets, how productive Devontae Adams was at Fresno State.
Oh, dude. So I remember that draft so well. That was the Jimmy G draft. And I love Jimmy Garoppolo. He was my
Jimmy
number
G,
2.
man.
He
That's
was
what
my
you
number
mentioned out
2
of all
corner.
those guys. You don't mention Odell Beckham, Mike Evans, and
No, that was the
Brandon
Jimmy G
Cooks.
draft because Jimmy G was my guy. Jimmy G was my number 2 quarterback. Teddy Bridgewater. People love Teddy Bridgewater. They're like, he's number 1 pick in the draft. I was like, okay, I like him in the late first round, but Jimmy G was my number 2. It was like, this guy went to a big school. He would be my guy. I like Jimmy G better than Carr. I hated Blake Bortles. I was like, this guy's a meathead. I don't know why teams are trying to draft him the first round. He went number 3 overall. I don't know what they were thinking. He didn't even throw that well. He was a big body guy, but he didn't have that great of an arm. And then Johnny Manziel was like, that was a wasted draft pick. Great job. Like, this guy's a dumpster fire waiting to happen. I love Jimmy G in that draft, but that was such a good wide receiver draft. Jordan Matthews was one of my favorites in the draft. He didn't turn out, but I love Devontae Adams. And I remember watching Devontae Adams and watching Derek Carr. And it was like, Derek Carr is not that great. He's just chucking it to Devontae Adams all day long and misses him a lot. But Devontae Adams gets everything. And I remember watching Fresno State, and I grew up just outside of Fresno, Visalia, California. A ton of friends went to Fresno State, a ton of friends that are fans of Fresno State, and always am aware of Fresno State football. And shout out to my guy Bernard Berrien, who's my number 1 like draft crush out of Fresno State back in the day.
Twice.
Yep. And I'm like, man, Devontae Adams is the dude. Derek Carr, I'm not sure is that dude. He's all right, but Devontae Adams is the guy.
Well, Devontae Adams' name came up in my mentions.
And he didn't run great at the combine.
He did not run great. Yeah. But as far as being a terrific athlete, like Devontae Adams was always that. He was a hooper first. And I don't even think he played football until like really late in high school, like maybe his junior or senior year of high school. So Wicks, hopefully I'm not getting too excited about this guy, but it was just interesting. I knew nothing about him. You brought him up, said that the 49ers had met with him and, looked at 30, and you mocked him to the 49ers, if y'all listened to yesterday's episode. And I had no idea, but I kind of clicked on his name and some highlights. I hate watching highlights. Y'all know I do not watch highlights. But the highlights popped up, and I'm like, it's kind of sudden. Catching it. I'm like, hey, man, this guy's kind of nice. And then I went and watched his actual games, and I said, hey, there is something here. There's something here with this guy. Not first round, not second round. I'm not saying that, but there's definitely something there with like his ability and me thinking, obviously tying it to the 49ers and how he would fit with the Niners. And I've been just asking, get somebody who brings that different dynamic. It doesn't have to be a big guy, but can you just play big? And he clearly plays big.
Can you win in an area of the field where the 49ers need to win more? That's the way I look at it. And it's not just 4-3, can you run fast? It's can you win intermediate and deep and win the ball? Go get the ball skills, run routes in this level. Because the Niners can win short all day long. They can catch and run. They have some guys that are fast and stuff, but like more sophisticated winning in the area of the field that's harder to win, intermediate and deep.
If Wicks had like doubled down on his junior season or sophomore season, whenever that was, that 1,200-yard season, where would he be drafted? Like,
if he backed up his last year with the year before, 1,200 yards again, didn't come up lame and ran a 4.47 as you projected it to, we'd be talking about him with Mingo and A.T. Perry and Jaden Reed and these guys. And all these guys we're talking about in late third round for the 49ers, and who knows, maybe even higher. I like all the tape from all these guys better than Danny Gray. And it's not to hate on Danny Gray. And I do like Danny Gray. And I like Danny Gray as a 4th or 5th round guy last year. Late 3 is practically a 4th round pick. So, not a terrible pick and not a bad player. It's not to crush Danny Gray, but I like some of these guys a little bit more just as pure football players. Danny Gray's got that speed that you can't teach. Can he learn some of the rest? We'll see what he looks like in year 2. But there's still some good options out there for the 49ers, Croc.
You talked about Danny Gray, and I think he's key. He's the reason why 49ers might hold off on going after a receiver at any point in this draft. But again, it almost feels like Aaron Banks all over again. We watched Aaron Banks, did not identify him as someone that was a fit for the 49ers, right? Just based off of his college film coming out as a prospect, this is not a fit. You gotta do a little bit more to reshape your body, whatever movement skills. You gotta improve on all this. He went, did it, played it exceptionally well as his sophomore year in the NFL. And Danny Gray coming out, watching his film. Don't watch highlights. You see, he can win vertically, but it gets a little weird. I'm watching guys cover him, and they were covering him like he ran a 4.6, not like he ran a 4.3. And you don't see, the releases off the line of scrimmage. You didn't see him utilizing the threat of his speed to push up vertically and sit those routes down, get guys going upfield. There was just, you don't see him truly understanding leverage and how to kind of get inside, break off his route a certain way to really free himself up with routes. And that's not to say he'll never be able to do those things. He just has to really work on it, as did Aaron Banks. Danny Gray has to do those things to take that next step. And if he does, then okay, you're awesome. And those things can definitely happen. But you gotta really work on it. And a lot of the fastest guys, lean on their speed too much. And that's why the fastest 40-yard dash guys typically aren't great receivers. Now, the guys like Tyreek Hill, who after his rookie year called Keith Williams, Coach Dub, Tokay High School, shout out to him, Stockton, California. All right. But he called up Coach Dub and said, "Can I work with you?" And Dub worked on everything with getting high-end controlled speed out of a guy that is one of the fastest players in the NFL. So now you see this version of Tyreek Hill, and now every time you see somebody that ran super fast, you think you're going to get Tyreek Hill, and you're not. Tyreek had to go kind of relearn exactly how to play the receiver position and how to run routes and how to be more under control and how to, get out of his breaks and stop in 2 steps. Like, he had to learn those things. And a lot of the fast guys, they don't. They just, I'm just fast. I'm just going to run by everybody. And that's not how it's going to work in the NFL.
In the chat, Danny Gray will light it up this year, especially if Lance plays. I don't know if Lance is going to be the guy. And that might have been the idea behind Danny Gray. But if Lance is not the quarterback, by the way, I got my shout out Rita Oak. I got my Simba Trey Lance Jimmy G shirt on today because I think that I was thinking this might be the last day that Trey Lance is a San Francisco 49er if he gets traded. Hasn't gotten traded yet, by the way. And also in the chat, Tim says the beauty of tonight, Lance still a Niner. For another day, he is. We'll see what happens tomorrow. I'm not convinced he's still going to be a 49er, but no first rounders offered. Are the Niners asking for a first? Then maybe it won't happen.
Right here in the chat, we got RLB. He says, "Croc, I foresee Gray improving just like we saw Ayuk improve." I don't think Ayuk's improvement had to come from actual ability on the field. It was something off the field with like a mindset, or maybe taking blocking more serious or whatever it was. But it wasn't like, "Hey man, coming out, you have to learn how to run routes." Like, that was not his issue.
I mean, he got better route wise, but that wasn't the issue. I think it was more blocking. And I think when you think about routes too, it's like, okay, can you physically run routes? Can you get out of your breaks? Can you set guys up? You think of it like a 7-on-7. Like, I remember scouting Jerry Jeudy. It's like routes on top of routes, right? The feet, like getting in and out of the breaks. It all looks great, looks good. But can you, when someone's on you, when there's a linebacker over here and there's safety over the top, and like, how can you set guys up? Can you win in this little area? Can you settle down when you need to in a zone? And the other part of it is, especially with Kyle Shanahan, it is so specific. You might not like winning the route and getting open might not be what Kyle Shanahan wants you to do on a route. You need to be this many inches off of this hash and right here in this area. And your job might be to be exactly here because this other dig needs to happen here. And there's this much space that ball needs to go in. And if you're freelancing over here, you're not in the right spot. So there's a lot that goes into it when it comes to quote unquote routes, especially with Kyle Shanahan.
You talk about the mental aspect of it, and especially with Kyle Shanahan. I don't know exactly what he wants, but I do remember being with the New York Jets and some of my buddies, shout out to my guy, Joe Collins, and just remember them walking around with this thick flashcards. And, it was a play and then just all these sight adjustments off of it. And these are things that these guys have to know. Like, you're coming from college. A lot of times it's just, hey, you got to post, right? They look to the sideline. The coaches do the little signals and stuff. And then it's like, I got one route, this. In the NFL, it is not like that. It's
No.
like, first of all, defenses disguise way more, but it's like, is it too high? Then you have to run your route this way. But if it's single high, then you have to run your route this way. And if you have this look, then you have to kind of hook up and then maybe like, shade outside. And if you're not doing those things, it can really throw off everything, especially if you're not on the same page with the quarterback. So a lot of times you see a quarterback throw a ball and you're probably looking like, what the heck was he thinking? Like, why did he throw it there? Not knowing the receiver screwed up. Like, this receiver did something he was not supposed to do that. And it makes the quarterback look all crazy. And that's why you see the quarterbacks, they pan to the quarterback and he's like, like pointing like, dude, go here, but man, it's so much mental with the receiver position. And that's why sometimes it takes guys a little bit longer to kind of catch on, especially in the 49ers offense.
We're going long here on this live post-first round pre-day 2 episode of Locked On 49ers here. There's some talk today, Croc, about the 49ers and the offensive tackle position. And but Matt Mayoko brought up something about Kyle Shanahan or John Lynch, who had talked about how in the past, how the 49ers were taking offers and maybe even kind of shopping a little bit Mike McGlinchey, knowing they weren't going to be able to sign him into free agency, getting ahead of it a little bit. And my question to that is, and the idea was, maybe offensive tackle is not that important and they might not attack offensive tackle in the draft, and they're cool with Colton McKivitz and he would have been the plan last year and everything's all good there at offensive tackle. So my question is, how important is offensive tackle? How much should they be attacking that tomorrow? Should they even draft in the 3rd round? Should they be trying to move up to find a guy there to at least play swing tackle? Because when I look at offensive tackle lineage and just looking at the 49ers, looking at how important offensive tackles are around the league, looking how high the offensive tackles went in this draft, which is not surprised. Like, look, this is what I said on Peacock and Williamson this morning. It's like, if you want to bet on something, go to FanDuel.com and bet on something. Bet on the quarterbacks falling, offensive linemen going higher than everyone expects. And that's exactly what happened, at least with Will Levis. It happened with him falling out. And I definitely won my under on 4.5 quarterbacks going in the first round. I knew Hendon Hooker wasn't going to be going in the first round, but thought Will Levis would be going a lot higher. So when it comes to offensive tackle, Croc, and I looked at the lineage of the 49ers, like, how important is it, even under Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch? Because the idea was, it was laid out to me this way. What is... like maybe John Lynch just doesn't look at offensive tackles as much as Brian Peacock does and think it's that important. It's like, well, the 49ers drafted Mike McGlinchey in the first round. They traded for Trent Williams after Joe Staley was retiring. You got to go back 15 years. Go back to 20. So Joe Staley was drafted in 2007. In 2008, he played right tackle his rookie year. And then he was left tackle forever in 2008, his second year on. So going back 15 years, Croc, we got Joe Staley, Trent Williams. That's it at left tackle. You go back to right tackle, going back to 2010, drafting Anthony Davis in the first round. It goes Anthony Davis. I think there might have been one weird year, and then Trent Brown, and then Mike McGlinchey. You got 5 offensive tackles over the course of 15 years. 5 offensive tackles, counting both left and right. 4 out of the 5 first-round picks. It's important. And you look at every team in the league. Look at the team that have bad tackles. They're bad teams. Look at the teams like the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, see you later. Tyreek Hill. But guess what? They've put all their other resources into the offensive line. Offensive tackle is important. And I'm not going to say that Colton McKivitz is going to be a disaster for the 49ers. I'm just saying offensive tackle is pretty important. And you can't take it lightly.
I don't think so at all. But you don't have the resources right now. Part of it is, and there are probably still some good offensive linemen out there, but what kind of hinders it, and the guy who played terrific for the 49ers, but you traded a lot to get Christian McCaffrey. So now you don't have a 2nd round pick, a 3rd round pick. I know we think of Trey Lance. I mean, that was likely going to be a late round pick anyways, but also not having that 2nd and your original 3rd to even be able to move up and potentially draft an offensive tackle. That kind of hurts you right now. Now, again, 2nd round or 3rd round offensive tackle or Christian McCaffrey, I'd take Christian McCaffrey. But it just hurts you right there because now you kind of have to lean on Colton McKivitz. And again, and I don't remember, but something about him scares me, especially after seeing that preseason game with Texans with Trey Lance running for his life. And I'm like, wow, both of these tackles suck. Thank God they don't have to play. And now McKivitz has to play a lot. And maybe he can fill in for a game, and he's done that for Trent Williams. But when you got to fill in for 18 or 17 game season, you start to get a little more exposed.
I do wonder, Croc, because interior offensive linemen a lot easier to find than tackles. I still do wonder if Spencer Burford, the plan is maybe he's the guy at right tackle, or at least has an opportunity to compete with Colton McKivitz, which is maybe why they're not worried about it as much potentially. Who knows? Maybe Trey Lance gets traded over the course of the next 24 hours.
But Josina Anderson said, I mean, there weren't really like any heavy conversations about Trey Lance being traded. And Josina's pretty plugged in.
Mike Silver said in response to, I think it was Javier Vega said, pick 33 would get it done from the Texans. Texans don't have pick 33 anymore. They traded it as part of that move up. And Mike Silver's response to that was, no chance a team's going to offer that. The 49ers would accept that in a heartbeat. Is Trey Lance worth that much less than what Sam Darnold in the past was worth when he was traded after he failed with the Jets? After Josh Rosen's rookie year, he got traded for a second round pick. Is Trey Lance worth less than that? I just can't buy it.
I think it's just still, even those guys that you talked about, well, although not great film, but they just played so much more. So at least you just kind of,
you had bad tape instead of no tape.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like credit, right? Like, don't they tell you bad credit is kind of better than no credit?
They say that, but I think those are the people trying to sell you credit too. You can build it. You can go from no credit to good credit easier than go to bad credit to good credit.
Right. But I think with Trey, there's just not a lot out there. So giving up anything for him would be tough. Like I said, I would feel, if I'm a team, I would feel uncomfortable giving up a second. Like, I would want to give up a third. If I have to give up a second, maybe. Now, does that make sense for the 49ers? Maybe they're like, heck no, definitely not taking a third for them, right? And that's where it's like, well, we don't have anything to really talk about. So you go ahead, keep the guy that you really don't want to play. You want to play this broken elbow guy over him, and we'll just keep our third round pick in our pocket and maybe draft Will Levis or something because he keeps sliding.
Yeah, Will Levis is sliding now. So a team like, say, the Titans, who didn't go quarterback in the first round, still need their quarterback potentially of the future. And Rand Carthon's there. Could he come calling for the 49ers? But then Will Levis is still around. So one of those teams that might have spent a second on Trey Lance or wanted to offer it at least, with the 49ers take it. I don't know. But yeah, like a third, fourth round pick, it's not worth it for what Trey Lance could be. And I'm holding on to him for sure. And maybe even a high second at this point. I don't know if that's even worth it for the 49ers. But
you need something that's like, if he does go and become some kind of star, you got to feel at least kind of comfortable. Well, at least we gave this, we got this in return, and Brock Purdy is exceptional as well.
And look,
like, what are the Falcons? And I don't know what the Packers gave up to get Brett Favre from the Falcons after his rookie year.
I think it was a second.
Was it a second?
He was a second or third, something like that.
I ain't saying that Trey Lance is going to go and be Hall of Fame Super Bowl winning quarterback Brett Favre, but how do the Falcons feel about moving on from him so quick?
Here we go. After the 1991 season, the Green Bay Packers sent a first-round pick to the Falcons to acquire Brett Favre.
What was the issue?
I have no idea.
I remember something about pain pills and stuff, but I don't know. It's like, is that why he got traded?
I don't know. That's a really weird one. I don't know the story behind it. I don't remember that. I wonder if it had to do with who was the Falcons quarterback then? Chris Chandler? Remember Crystal Chandelier, they called him because he's always hurt?
No way Chandler was a quarterback in 1991.
That's too long ago. He was later 90s, huh?
Well, I know he was there when Mike Vick was there. Like when Mike Vick got drafted #1 overall.
Was he there that late? In
Yeah.
2000? Okay. I didn't realize.
But I don't know when he got there, but Mike Vick obviously got drafted like 01. And so I don't know when Chandler got to the Falcons. So.
Great one. So anybody who remembers 1991 better than we do, let us know.
Jerry Glanville didn't like him. And
So
that's
here
the
we
head
go.
coach, right?
Yeah, here's a quick little blurb about it. I just typed in, why did the Falcons trade Brett Favre? The quarterback was not a good fit for the team, it says, partly because he spent a lot of time in bars and overindulged in drugs and alcohol use during that time. So,
and that's what I said about the pain pills. I remember that he got addicted to the pain pills. But also he talked about going into a quarterback meeting room and not knowing what quarters was or not knowing what cover 2 was. He had no idea what any of that stuff was.
Have you heard JT O'Sullivan talk about? Because JT O'Sullivan, this is late Brett Favre career. He played with Brett Favre, and he's like a young, up and coming quarterback. And he's like, okay, Brett Favre, give me, spill your knowledge on me. And Brett Favre's response was 1, 2, 3, put it on him. That's what he told him. Drop back and throw it to the dude as hard as you can.
Somebody needs to let Trey Lance do that.
So funny.
Maybe Trey Lance needs to go to the Packers. I know they got Jordan Love, but
oh man. All right. And so let's put it together. Let's say the Niners do get an offer, Titans, whoever it is, they say, yeah, we want to trade you a 2nd round pick for Trey Lance. The Niners are like, I like that. We're going to take your 2nd round pick and draft somebody here near the top of the 2nd round. And it's maybe an offensive tackle. The left tackles are gone. Like the guys who can play left tackle, they got drafted in the 1st round. That's what happens. Matthew Bergeron, maybe he's a guy. I believe he did meet with the 49ers, whether it was the combine. I don't think it was a 30 visit. Matthew Bergeron out of Syracuse, 6'5", looks the part, good player. He's not a freakish athlete, a freakish specimen like some of these players that win the 1st round, but 6'5", 318, 33 3/4. So, nice arm length. And didn't work out as far as running at the combine. I don't know if he ran at his pro day. I'm not seeing it right now, but interesting player, high 2nd round pick potentially. Maybe he's your guy for the 49ers. Maybe Trey Lance sticks around and we're waiting all the way until 99 Croc tomorrow for the 49ers to make a selection. But of course, no matter what happens tomorrow, Croc, we've got everybody covered as we do every day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks everybody for making this your first listen. Croc and I back tomorrow to break it all down. Maybe even extra live show in there. And who knows, maybe a bonus show or an emergency pod if the 49ers do make a move and get up a little bit earlier than pick 99. But stay tuned to Locked On 49ers. Either way, talk to you then.